Okay, let's get started. And I'm just kidding about the settle down. Okay. Hi there. Welcome to. Is this in my? This is in my. So welcome to the ACM AI April event. We have a great presentation. But first, company business. Oh, and also make sure you eat. Okay, so ACM SA is a professional chapter of the Association of Computing Machines. It's a very old organization that has a very a little outdated name. But pretty much we are people who are interested in tech. That's what brings us all together. And so ACM SA, our chapter, meets every other month. Kind of weird, but it should get normal within a couple of months. We meet every other month normally. We eat, we talk about tech-related stuff, and sometimes not. We usually have presentations. And our presentations are all over the place. We've had honor computing, we've had full stack orchestration, and some game dev stuff, and other stuff. And so we're just, if it's tech, you think it will be interesting, and you'd like to present, let us know. We'd love to have you up here and talk about something that's work-related, or a hobby. Okay, so let's spread this. Really cool. Okay, so these three ugly mugs. We started this organization a couple years ago because we were all in the student chapter of ACM, writing a huge creature. But we wanted to bring that to the postgraduate sector. And so that's what brought us together to start this organization. So anyways, you can find us we're on Discord and Zach's everywhere. So anytime you want to reach us, talk to Zach, and then he'll make sure you get routed to the right place. But we really enjoy being here, and we really enjoy you being here and being part of these presentations. Okay, but we're supported. So we're a nonprofit organization. We're supported by memberships. They pay for pizza and all the stuff that keeps us going. So if you're interested in helping out, please think about becoming a member. Our meetings are always free, so you don't have to join to come and be part of this. Just so you know. What else we got? Oh, we have an exciting new website that was created by Gene right there. So any bugs, you will get routed directly to that guy. Anyways, so he's been working really hard at putting together a new site, new look, new theme, all that kind of stuff. So please feel free to check it out. And if you do encounter something or have ideas, please let us know. We'll be adding more stuff to it, like newsletters and things, whatever Zach and Gene can think of. Okay, a few QR codes if you're interested. I'll bring these up at the very end in case you want to follow us and that sort of stuff. That's okay. So now we get to the good stuff. Done with the company business for a little while. So our speaker tonight is Ryan Orsinger, and right there. And I did a little research on you. Let's see if I remember it correctly. Okay. So he graduated from Trinity in 2005 with an economics degree. Yeah. Okay. So, and it's interesting. But then went on to work as a software developer for a couple of companies, and then went on to be an instructor at CodeUp. And he was originally a web dev instructor, and then became a lead web dev instructor, and then moved to data science, I think when CodeUp added that to their program. And then were you a lead instructor in data science? Lead instructor in data science. And then he left CodeUp, and now he is the director of data analysis and research with Haven for Hope. And I think that light means I've been talking too long. So without further ado, let's welcome Ryan Orsinger. You bet.
Thank you, everybody, for a warm welcome.
And it will give us a few seconds to get this set up. Okay, I'll put the mic right here.
Okay, the mic is right there. Good evening, everybody. It is great to see you all. Some friendly faces, some new faces. If we haven't met already, my name is Ryan Orsinger, and let's talk shop and all that good stuff. So I'm going to get set up here. So I have two interesting stories to share about ACM. And the disclaimer is not currently a member of ACM locally. But the two stories, one was I started my undergrad at San Antonio College, and I took a C++ class, and it was great because it's C++, right? And it's, you know, logic thinking, and I've done with BASIC and stuff like that before, and HTML and all that kind of web stuff. And instead of the final, we had a choice. We could go to an ACM programming competition and compete with other students from other schools, or we can take the final. I was like, forget that. I'm going to compete in a thing and, you know, bring it if I got it, right? And I remember that day. It was, you know, it was a proctored thing. The professor was, you know, it was about half the class gave it a shot, and spent about an hour specking out, you know, reading the specs and planning things out. And then my partner and I, it was a team of two for each group. We decided, hey, let's just like go have a picnic and do the actual planning and the programming and the programmatic thinking outdoors. It was a nice, beautiful spring day, and so we printed out the whole app on paper and basically all the logical steps. Came back in, hammered out the code. The biggest problems were like formatting the printf and everything else, right? And then we ended up taking, I think, first or second place that year. So this was like the year, God, it was like 2000, 2001 or something like that. So it was a little while ago. And then the second ACM, and you know, funny story, fast forward, randomly run into the same friend from school years later, and we ended up getting married. Which was like, oh, hey, remember that time when? And then yada, 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 life goes on, and not everything is persistent, right? But the other ACM story was I owe getting my house right now to having my ACM membership card in my wallet at the time. I was closing on a house, and we're doing all the paperwork and all this stuff. If you sign it, you sign 100 things, and they're like, it's time to prove your identity. I pull out my ID. I'm like, that's great. Where's your utility bill that we didn't tell you to bring? Or secondary form of identification that we didn't tell you to bring? Something with your name on it. So I'm freaking out. Like, I'm not going to get my house. The loan's going to fall through, all this shit. And then I had my ACM card. So there we go. The speech, the talk tonight that I have for y'all is People, Not Widgets, Lessons Learned from Applying Systems Thinking. And that's where I'm going to show you some stuff you may or may not have seen before in analytics, and a lot of y'all probably have some analytical chops to social services delivery. And when I say people, not widgets, for the title, I'm thinking about people outcomes, right? And the outcomes for people of systems. From a social services standpoint and like human well-being standpoint. And it can be so easy for us to over-optimize the widgets of a system. Like, oh man, my work is to optimize this one widget of the system, this one subcomponent. But my perspective here is to share with you all this idea of looking at the whole, looking at what artists would call the gestalt, right? The whole rather than the sum of the parts, to understand how the entire system works, not just components or subcomponents of that system. And then the more you think about systems thinking, the more you can start considering systems of systems, right? And I don't just mean software systems or hardware systems, but any kind of system, right? Like a bank account is a system, right? Where you can put money away, and if it's a savings account, it might earn, 0.25% a year, or something like that. Or a credit card is a system, or predatory finance is a system, right? Or socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor, that's a system too, right? These are all systems. So systems thinking is this holistic idea of analyzing the whole and looking at like I said, the gestalt, right? The outcomes, not just the widgets or the subcomponents, or the problems or the fires of the day. So the problems or the fires of the day, that's at the top of the iceberg. What happened? Oh my God, users can't log in, or whatever the event is. And then really that line, that water line, right above it is where we can measure trends and patterns, right? Especially with analytics, data collection, where we want to anticipate and forecast things. But underneath the trends and patterns, there's more systems dynamics going on. What are the policies that undergird things, right? There's schools closing across the city, across the state, right? What is going on? It's not just what happened in the moment this year, last year. It's not just what's been happening the last 5 years. How have these things been funded for 40 years, 50 years, right? There's structures behind things, right? Structural inequity, right? Power dynamics, perceptions, lenses. This is also where mindset comes in, right? What are the cultural assumptions behind things too, right? And it's all invisible until you start diagramming it out. So I'm going to try and connect a couple of things. I'm going to try and connect data visualizations, like charts and graphs, and systems thinking to connect this idea of making the invisible visible. So if you make a pie chart, you make a scatter plot, you make a regression line, you're making the invisible visible in some way. But when you start diagramming a system, you're also making the invisible visible. And when you do that, when you're working with data, or you're working with systems, and making the invisible visible, it's a moral act. It is an ethical thing to both produce data presentations and to consume them, right? Because lives could be on the line. They literally could be life and death. Or it could just be profit or more profit, depending on the perspective, right? The views and opinions I express here are my own and not necessarily those of my employer, Haven Pro, la la la. All right, let's think about scale and a component versus a system. Or this is a really simple example. Say you're in a boat and you're rowing, and you're trying to get across the bay. What do? To get there quicker, row faster, right? What if the current is going with you? What if the current's going against you? What if the current's taking you out to sea? The current is the system. And you in the dinghy with your two oars is a component in that system, but the magnitudes of these forces are drastically different, right? You carried out to sea. Thankfully, that person didn't die, right? They didn't get carried out to sea. But that effort of rowing, man, working up a sweat. I'm making a lot of sweat, a lot of rows, strokes per minute, versus the force of a current, right? The effort of rowing. I'm going to try and connect this to the social services space, or even the business metric space. Effort of rowing, you can control that. So guess what you get a KPR for? Fucking rowing, right? But what really matters is the entire dynamics of that system. So if you're just rowing against the current, it doesn't, you'll hit the metrics, you might get the bonus, but you could potentially fail in the overall goal, right? It's invisible versus visible, depending on how zoomed in you get. It's kind of the perspective I'm trying to thread through all these ideas. So let's talk about diagramming systems. Here's the simplest diagram of a simple system we can talk about. Is a bathtub, right? A bathtub without a hole in it is a one stock system. So that's like a bucket, right? The stock is how much you have. And the flow from your inflows is how much you have flowing in, and you may have flows going out, right? So in some, it says accumulator, bathtub over time, right? Your inflows could be accumulators, or your outflows could be regulating your outflows. And this is a pretty simple diagram, but when we start putting together causal diagrams for your inflows, your outflows, your feedback loops, and your feedback loops could be built on delays like inventory systems or time to process paperwork, right? Things like that. Or there could be multiple different components in there. I'll show you something a little bit more complex. So the flow is pretty constant over time, and we have a cumulative effect of getting water in the bathtub. Right? Pretty simple. So take this idea of whatever you're trying to think about. I talked about a savings account. What are some of the inflows and outflows to a savings account? Cash into a savings account. So some sort of contribution. That would be one inflow. What's another? Interest. Yeah, interest. And then outflows could be fees. They could be everything else, right? But a potential outflow could be the bank goes belly up and you lose the whole thing. So the practice is define your inflows, define your outflows, identify points of delay, identify feedback loops, and we'll talk about balancing loops versus reinforcement loops. If you're reinvesting, that's a reinforcement loop, right? If you have population growth that outstrips death, right? Death rates are pulling down, but your accumulator, if your accumulator is greater than your break, right? If your gas is better than your break, you're going to have population growth or growth in your bank account. We can get overcomplicated pretty quickly. It doesn't take much to do a very complex systems diagram, but these are just models, right? And models, just like a model airplane, you're making an approximation of reality, and you're just trying to make the invisible visible, reify that. So I'll give you three other simple examples. A reinforcement loop, that's like the constantly reinvesting in dividends or something like that. Or if we magically have births with no deaths, that's a reinforcement loop. Balancing loop is one stock of something is dependent on the other stock of something, like inventory and sales. You can't sell more than you have inventory. And if you have too much inventory, that means you got to make sales to reduce that. And then there's all sorts of other system dynamics that can happen that produce unintended effects, like diminishing returns, right? Or short-term fixes that cause long-term failure, right? Doing one more step in your diagram, on the right-hand side, we've got a diagram of an HVAC system for a home or a commercial business, right? You have heat coming in, you have heat generated by the furnace, and then heat dissipating outside of the building. And your thermostat setting, whatever that's set to, is a balancing loop. It's trying to maintain in that range, right? And then you have other parts of this heating system as a whole, not just the thermostat. But if you have your windows open, you can have your HVAC cranking all day long, right? So what are we missing? And once we diagram out the inflows, the outflows, the feedback loops, and the direction of causality, you can start looking at where do you have levers to control, right? And visualizing the behavior of the system, and then identifying those available levers. That's the hokey pokey of systems thinking. That's what it's all about. Okay, we're going to do one more. I think this is the last little diagram. Okay. Another systems diagram that we can visualize, and you'll have probably seen this one a whole lot. It's commonly called shifting the burden. And what's going on, let me zoom in if I can to the diagram itself. Nope, I can't zoom in. Okay, cool. Yeah, all right. The diagram itself, we have a symptomatic solution, right? That's like, ooh, hello. Things are happening. You're okay. Zachariah to the rescue. So shifting the burden, let's say we have a problem. There's some sort of problem. Let's say employee underperformance, right? You're a supervisor or a colleague, and there's employee underperformance in the workplace. That's the symptom, right? You delegate the thing doesn't get done to your expectations. The symptomatic solution is to run it and help, right? The fundamental solution, like, here, let me take that for you, and let me just fix that typo, and you grab the keyboard and do the thing and fix the code for them, right? That's the short-term fix. The long-term fix is to keep your colleague in the driver's seat with the code and work with them, do training, etc. So this could be the manager provides a solution, but really the long-term thing is you need to do more training. So we see this all the time with like declining revenue growth or employee performance, things like fast fixes, right? Maybe the right thing is to eat the healthy thing, but you have a snack in front of you and you have a problem, you want to fix it fast, right? So really, the biggest difference between these two potential solutions is one of them has a delay. And it's just something that simple that means, kind of back to the example of the current, right? The current is where your long-term fix could be, but there might be a delay, right? Or just more costs involved, or just slowing down versus the quick fix, right? So just some concepts to think about in terms of visualizing dynamics of systems, whether if they're simple things or complex things, including like the global economy or something like that, right? Some examples and archetypes of systems diagrams that are it's real fun to get into this stuff. I'll have the recommended reading at the end. Fixes that fail, tragedy of the commons. Anybody remember tragedy of the commons from economics class? Nah, one person, two people. Hit me. Tragedy of the commons. No, okay. All right, no worries, no worries. You didn't sign up to be put on the spot. So in the olden days, at least in the Western Europe side of things, specifically in England, there was this idea of the commons where anybody could graze their sheep. Guess what happens when everybody can graze their sheep for free in the same area? No grass. There's no grass. What happens to a sheep who's hungry when they go somewhere with no grass? They eat the roots. Yeah. So, and what happens is Amanda shows up with her sheep and her flock of sheep, and I show up with my flock of sheep. Even at the sheep level, they compete more rapidly to consume the resource faster than the other sheep. So the tragedy that is the common, the idea of the commons is just common land that it's like public land. It's like if the park out there wasn't, we could all graze down there, right? So the depletion of a resource depletes at an accelerating rate when there's competition. And then when the sheep eat the roots, you destroy the productive capacity for that system to rejuvenate and renew itself, right? Capitalism. So that's a thing. There's other systems that are easy to diagram, like drift to low performance, right? It's easier to tolerate the behavior than it is to correct it, whether if it's technical or interpersonal. Success to the successful. Nothing succeeds like success, right? We see this with network effects in the capital markets, right? Nothing succeeds like success. And then we talk about shifting the burden. So relying on the intervention rather than fixing the root cause. And I'm going to connect that one back to some of the larger topics in just a minute. So the core takeaway so far of this whole systems piece is systems can generate their own behavior that could be completely non-obvious. And let's take the idea of the commons. The king or the royalty, they think they're doing a great thing, giving the land away to everybody to graze, right? But then that resource is depleted at an accelerated rate. Thanks to socialism. Where do we end up? I don't know. But you can better understand how to interact with that system when you diagram it, so you can make the invisible visible, right? which begs the question, how on earth does that help in social services delivery? So it is my honor and pleasure to work for an agency called Haven for Hope. It's 22 acres right on the other side of the highway right here. Slept just over 1,350 people last night in dormitories and with a co-located campus. It's a single community campus designed to help people end their homelessness and address root causes of homelessness. And so like I want to connect that to system thinking, because the origin story of a 22-acre campus that took $100 million to open its doors, is that a widget-sized problem, or is that a system problem or a system solution? I'd say it's a systemic kind of thing, right? And is like homelessness in modern America a systemic thing? You betcha, right? So I'll talk about the origin story in just a minute, but as I think about kind of the widgets of some of my work and some of the work of, and a lot of people in social services, there's funders that are city, state, federal, hopefully some federal, private, etc., foundations, grants. And every funder brings with them their own perspectives, assumptions, and lens. Reporters, policymakers, funders are all going to say, hey, I need you to do these metrics in order to earn this grant so that you can serve people. But those funders or policymakers don't always have the entire system loaded up in their context. They kind of have oh, you want to house people? Great, and homelessness, house people. But that, if you're only looking at a very small perspective and not like what happens to those individuals after 10 years, 15 years, that's a more systems level perspective than a report to a funder that's like how many housing vouchers were utilized this year. That's important, but it's not the long-term outcome. It's an output of the system, but not an outcome of the system. I'll give you a really kind of a sharp example. The Housing and Urban Development Department, HUD, they fund a lot of social services. Because housing is part of the name, they're focused on housing, not necessarily things like substance use treatment or mental health. So all of HUD's measurements are about housing vouchers, right, and housing interventions. But get a load of this one. We're talking about widgets versus systems. The way HUD across the United States of America defines if somebody is newly homeless or not is if they enter a homeless services project, if they've already been out of the system for 2 years. They had to draw the line somewhere, right, for defining if somebody's new to the system. But that's a little bananas to me. That doesn't match anything that seems to reflect reality, right? Also, I'll give you another example. So HUD only measures exits to housing, which is essentially, did you use the intervention that HUD provided versus were you able to leave a provider, put it with whatever you needed, whether it's job training or family reunification, case management, mental health services, whatever constellation of services you needed to exit homelessness and remain out of homelessness for longer than 2 years. Right? I'll give you a numeric example. In our community, we have, I'll pick on just like Haven housing numbers. There's about 1,000 people moving to housing exits every year. It's a huge system, 1,000 people. But the number of people who exit homelessness without a HUD intervention and remain out of homelessness, that's like 6,000. That was 6,000 people last year. So they were able to put things in the rearview mirror. They didn't necessarily check in with their case manager on the way out, but they remained out of not just Haven for Hope, but the entire homeless response system of almost 50 agencies between street outreach, city workers, SAM Ministries, Salvation Army, Corazon over there running the day center, CAM, like pretty wild, right? So we can be unintentionally get so myopic, that means like narrow, like a microscope, right? Get so focused on some widget pieces that we miss the system, right? And so that's something that I'm very interested in as a researcher is what is the system doing to produce outcomes, not just what are the metrics that make it on a report to a funder, because that's what the funder cares about, right? Kind of wild, huh? So I'll give you another, yeah, I'll keep going. This stuff is wild, I love it. Some other examples of siloed approaches rather than systemic approaches, especially in the homeless services space. In many, many communities, the law enforcement approach to people experiencing homelessness is criminalization, right? And you can't police away people living and dying in public, right? It doesn't work that way. Courts and county jails are another kind of silo. There's a pretty good stream back and forth here. And then local mental health authority. It's like Center for Healthcare Services is our local mental health authority. So they help people who are dealing with mental health crises, detox, like outpatient detox, like methadone treatment, inpatient detox, that kind of stuff. But in many, many systems, the mental health authority isn't connected to the courts and the jails. It's not connected to trauma reduction strategies from law enforcement. Those, in fact, do exist. Hospitals discharge human beings to the street instead of to shelter. It's kind of a broken system in a lot of places. And there's always room for improvement everywhere. But another silo would be the homeless response system, like HUD. HUD just cares about kicking out a housing voucher, right? And that's great, but unless you have a coordinated system of care, it's tough to go from one place for shelter, take a bus across town to go to your doctor, take 2 buses to get to work. Any bus riders in here? Rode the bus till I was 25. It sucked. Yeah. I love it when it's like one shot, but the second you do a transfer, like one shot, I will live on a one shot, but that transfer, all it takes is missing it, right? That's a system too. So what's the coordinated system of care? I'll bring in the Haven for Hope perspective. In 2010, San Antonio as a community, a public-private partnership, chose to do things completely differently than the rest of the nation, other communities, and really something that was very different, hadn't been realized before. This is a public-private partnership, city, state, federal, like just this amount of federal, but a lot of private to address root causes of homelessness and set up a 22-acre community campus right over there, right? With not just case management, not just workforce development, but trying to reach across to produce medical results, on-site medical, from a medical provider, the federally qualified medical provider, CentroMed, so that's like low-income primary care, mental health through Center for Healthcare Services, jail outreach. So if there's folks who are awaiting, say, trial in Bexar County Jail, they can bond out. I'm not going to ask anybody who's been arrested, but the way that works is if you were to get picked up and spend the night in jail, and you have to wait until your court date, or you can get a PR bond. Well, how do you PR bond if you don't have an address? So jail outreach, so people can PR bond out to Haven when they don't have an address. There's also pretrial jail diversion as well, thanks to our friends at Bexar County. So that's a systemic approach, right? Where you have medical, dental, case management, housing services in one place where people need the services. It's a different way. There's not like a single diagram for this, right? But it's a different way of thinking about the problem. So you're not just running around trying to put out the fires, you're putting out the cause, right? As much as possible. I'm going to take a moment to brag on myself. No, I'm going to brag on the system that has been doing this work for 15 years before I showed up on the scene. I've been at Haven, I'm in my 4th year at Haven for Hope. I finally think I have an idea of how things work. But systems change over time too, right? So something that is very unique, not just about Haven, but our entire homeless response system in San Antonio, almost 50 agencies, there's data sets. This data set goes back more than 15 years for just about 50 agencies, longitudinal data, and when we looked at that HUD definition, where it's like, oh, if somebody's newly having a new experience of homelessness, use that person first language, right? A person's having a new experience of homelessness. If it's after 2 years, HUD counts it as new, because HUD hasn't spec'd out a longitudinal database for communities, right? They spec'd out a federal reporting platform for Congress. That's what that platform exists to do, right? But San Antonio as a community did something differently. And because of interagency data sharing, I'm able to measure not just how many people came to Haven. So Haven has served in 15 years, 52,108 people. And that cutoff was at the end of last fiscal year. And of those 52,000 human beings, 65%, so just shy of 2/3 of those individuals had only one stay at Haven. And when we look at this, so that's longitudinal study, lots of debugging, lots of double checking all of my work, right? But if I was just focused on how many housing exits this year, like HUD says, focus on that, that misses the cyclicality involved, right? And it also misses the fact that 2/3 of those people stayed out of Haven. And here's the kicker. It's not just a matter of staying out of Haven and going across the street to Sam Ministries or Salvation Army or something else. By using the data set of the entire community, which through data governance and data sharing policies, we're able to do, I'm able to tell you that over 90% of those 65% of 52, so that's like 34,000 people, give or take, at 1 year, 5 year, and 10-year marks have stayed out of other homeless service providers in San Antonio. And that's pretty profound, right? And that's not a measurement that you take off the shelf. My co-author and I had to like cook this up together. Hey, this is the way to measure the effectiveness of the system. So that's one of my messages, is sometimes you've got to build a measurement that doesn't exist on a KPI somebody gives you, right? Because the measurement you can come up with as a subject matter expert is more accurate and tells a more clear story of how the system works as a whole. Because you're the subject matter expert. And sometimes the funders want to hear about it. Sometimes they just want you to, right? And other times you produce something like that they've never seen before, because very few communities have, not that I know of, have a data set that's that longitudinally focused. So this, yeah, question.
I have a feeling though that kind of the beauty of that measurement really just goes to the core of Haven's mission.
It is the mission, and it's interesting. This is kind of like measuring something by a shadow, because I don't have a data set that's every single landlord in town, right? I don't know if all of these individuals reunited with family or moved out of town, right? 34,000 people, not all of them moved out of town, right? Across 15 years, there is mortality, but not 34,000 people died, right? Same thing with the justice system. 34,000 people didn't die, end up in jail, right? So I'm measuring by a shadow a little bit, and by and large, what the research shows is there's really, most episodes of homelessness that people experience are transitional in nature. And it's kind of like an 80-20 rule. Y'all ever seen like a 80-20 rule or a exponential distribution, exponential decay? If you look at the distribution, the largest majority, it's not a bell curve, right? I should have done an exponential distribution in here. But by and large, most people have a very transitional experience, situational experience. And a smaller percentage have an episodic experience, maybe every couple of years. And a very small percentage, less than 10%, maybe 11%, have a more chronic experience, have more chronicity in their experience of homelessness. Yeah.
So that metric that you have there,
yeah.
You said it's dealing more with the system, and the system that you guys are having in place is, are we keeping people from being homeless? Are we getting people out of homelessness?
Yeah.
And that answers it at a system level. Whereas when you were pointing to the HUD numbers, they were widget numbers. They They were just
Widget,
saying, hey,
yeah,
we got this
bingo.
little mechanism that maybe will help some people.
Yeah.
And all we're gonna do is just track that thing, right? And it's really, kind of micro level and keeps you from looking at the forest.
Mhm.
But what you have right there is something that really answers more of the forest level question. Are we helping people stay out of homelessness?
Yes. Yeah. That's a big focus there. And for 34,000 people, one stay was enough. For another 18,000 people, those individuals had more than one stay. And the next work I'm doing, so this is available live on the havenforhope.org website. It's a 200-page report. There's a 10-page executive summary, and there's a one-pager if you're interested in a super quick. The next paper that I'm working on is investigating what's the difference between people who had exactly 2 stays at Haven versus 3 or more. And it's as big of a difference, right? It's really interesting. For folks that had exactly 2 stays, the gap between their episodes, the average gap was 3.5 years. Now, averages can be misleading, right? Because they're hiding the entire distribution. But the folks with 3 or more stays, it's much less. It's like 1.4 years on average between. And there's also not one size that fits all with the Haven experience. We know this as people, right? Even if you have just a 2-track program, like an A track and a B track, if somebody goes to A and only A, that's 1 permutation, right? If somebody goes to B, that's 2 permutations. If somebody starts at A, then goes to B, that's 3 permutations. Somebody goes to B, then A, that's 4 permutations. It's okay, it's not math class. But with around 31 programs, there's more than 1,200 different unique program pathways that people took, not just theoretical, but these are actual progressions of programming that people have gone through. And that's pretty mind-blowing, right? This really tells the story. Put on the social worker hat, this tells the story that people are the best judgment of what they need, right? When they have an availability of programs to select from, not just one program or another. All right, so that's the systems thinking piece connected to the how does systems thinking work within social services. Again, personal opinion. I'm going to connect this back to data visualization, if I can. I'm going to share the idea with you. This quote comes from Edward R. Tufte. Wrote a book called Visual Display of Quantitative Information, taught at Stanford for an incredibly long time, and was also part of a special investigative group to Congress for the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. Anybody remember the Space Shuttle Challenger exploding tragically in the 80s? It may have been before some of y'all's time. But this wonderful quote that I take from Tufte, and I keep it close, is making and consuming presentations is an intellectual and moral activity. It's about your content and about your credibility. And I'm going to show you some charts that can speak to that a little more. So, Space Shuttle Challenger launched in, I think it was 1987, exploded before reaching orbit. Super tragic. There were several NASA, a cluster of NASA engineers challenged the launch that morning, right? I think it was like January. It was the winter, but it was in Cape Canaveral. They challenged the launch. They produced 13 slides of information. Some of it was handwritten notes from the engineers. What you're looking at here is the most coherent and highest resolution data display that they produced. Each one of those rockets is a different. So what happened was, rockets have these O-rings at critical junctures. At different temperatures, the O-rings would have some sort of mechanical failure. And that was ultimately what did in the Challenger. Was there was a failure on the O-ring that caused another failure and another O-ring, and then it blew up. Right? This slide has the most data, but what is it sharing? I see temperature at the top of some of the rockets. I see where it's showing visually where the O-ring damage occurred in all of these cases, where there was erosion on the O-ring, etc. Like a little piece of rubber, like a gasket, almost like a big honking gasket. But this kind of hides the story, doesn't it? You can already tell that this is a meaningless and useless data visualization just by looking at it. It's not even sorted, right? It's not a distribution. There's temperatures all over the place. But this is the best out of 13 slides that all the King sources and King's men from NASA, all the King's people try to say, don't do this launch. Well, they went forward to launch, people died. Here's the same data visualized on a simple scatter plot. Your x-axis is the temperature. We had the temperature of some of those, but we didn't have the temperature of that day, right? We had the temperature of some of those launches for those rockets, but we didn't have the temperature of the day of the launch. Right here, you have the temperature range of the day of the launch. So this is the same information from that same previous slide. This is produced by Edward Tufte. And your y-axis is an index of how much O-ring damage there was. And it just leaps off the screen, right? You have a negative relationship. The lower the temperature, the higher the amount of O-ring damage. So when I say we have a moral imperative to make clear the invisible, this is kind of what I mean, right? It's pretty wild, huh? It's rocket science. Leave that to the rocket scientists. Just actually do the data visuals in a way where you have your content and your credibility and you make the message clear. All right, I'm going to share with you a couple of other data visualization ideas. Just want to harp on these things. There's a data set that comes from the 1760s. It's a French mathematician, Anscombe, made a data set called Anscombe's Quartet, eponymously. It's a set of 4 data sets, and they all have basically the same descriptive stats. They have the same mean, sample variance, mean of X value, mean of Y value, correlation between X and Y, the linear regression line, the coefficient of determination. That's just the square of your correlation. And plus or minus sample variance there, that's nothing, right? It's 2 decimal, the averages are within two decimal places. The mean and the sample variance are exactly the same. I think this data set, whenever I hear somebody naively and well-intentionally, hopefully they're well-intentioned, the data doesn't lie. Anybody hear somebody say that, the data doesn't lie? Bless their hearts. They don't know what they're talking about. You can care about them. You can even ride their tails to excellence if they're in leadership and they trust you and believe in you because you make good data and you bring credibility to the stage. What's something that all of these measurements are aggregates, right? They're describing a central tendency. So the first thing you want to say, if anybody gives you a bunch of averages or a bunch of just aggregate statistics, show me the raw data. I'll give you a minute with this raw data. You have 4 data sets. So data set 1 has an X value and a Y value. So all of these Ys and all of these X's on the far left belong to data set 1, data set 2, this next one, data set 3, data set 4. Just take a moment with that. They all have the same X mean, Y mean, standard deviation, correlation coefficients between X and Y. You might see some anomalies already, right? Maybe, or maybe it's just lost in the sauce. So if you get some sort of fancy stats from somebody, show me the raw data, look at the raw data. And what else do? You graph it. Those are 4 completely different stories of 4 different data sets that have nearly the exact same descriptive statistics. Your first data set, that's a reasonable scatter plot, right? A lot of real world positively correlated variables scatter like that. Then you have something that looks like a parabola, right? Maybe a physical X and Y, like a basketball or a ballistic thing. Then you have a real tight trend with one single outlier, and then you have a basically a non-linear relationship with one outlier. Always, always, always whatever you're working with, especially, I mean, I bring up this idea of thinking in systems versus thinking in widgets, because if you're just jamming your data into a widget machine that's a stochastic parrot, right? It's gonna miss the forest for the trees sometimes, right? Especially if you're seeing the exact same descriptive stats, right? Here's another fun one. Some folks over at Autodesk took the idea of Anscombe's quartet and made something called the Datasaurus dozen. And it's 12 different data sets that have, down to the third decimal place, the same exact descriptive statistics, but the story is different for each one. So I say that, you know, the more we focus on optimizing a single widget or two widgets or the interaction of two widgets, we need to zoom out and look at the whole picture, both as a systems thinking mindset, diagram your system so you can see the invisible, but then graph your stuff so you can see the invisible. You know, data is not the thing itself. Data are the observed measurements of an underlying construct, right? You have all kinds of measurement error, bias, insufficient sample size, non-representative sample size, sample error, confounding variables. There's a great website called catalogofbias.org. It's a list of something like 67 different biases that can make their way into things, into studies, with longitudinal studies and case studies. This is built on a paper that was in a journal of chronic health disease article that brought up all of these biases showing up in medical research. Really, like any kind of stats, especially any kind of black box ML or language model, it's even more of a black box. You're talking to a stochastic parrot that's approximating and trying to trick you into thinking that the black box ML model, when really you just need to do a linear regression and graph your stuff, right? Here's another example. I think I have two more slides for you here, other than the recommended reading. The impact of studying on final grades. The y-axis is the grade. It's a little cut off, but it's 95, 90, 85, 80, 75. And then the x-axis is the number of hours studying. The data doesn't lie, right? The more you study, the worse you'll do. What is even going on there? Oh, hey, you want to look fancy? Try to publish this in research. Your p-value super low. Your correlation coefficient or your coefficient of determination is 0.32. That's 32%. 32% of the variance between x and y can be described. 32% of the variance in y can be described by x. That's super high. Smoking to lung cancer, the R squared is 0.6. So 0.32 is pretty damn good in the real world. But y'all know something is wrong with this. What's wrong with this? I'm sorry? Yeah. Oh, I gave it away, didn't I? No. It's ignoring something, right? And anytime you're surprised by something, it could be the result, or there could be something else going on, right? Should have made my labels a little larger. Math, physics, history, literature. If we break out and color code a third variable that's which course, we see that there's a positive linear relationship for all of these, each with their own R squared and low p-value. This right here is something called Simpson's paradox. Doesn't mean that it always happens, but it can happen that the relationship between variables could change directions if you disaggregate, or if you take another variable into account. In this, it's also called a confounding variable. It's a great name for that, because if you're confounded by that, there's probably some confounding variable. There's another explanation, something else going on. So my message on systems thinking, data visualization, the ethics of data visualization, and the ethics of designing systems and working with systems and measuring them in ways that capture the whole, is you want to get that whole story, not just, oh, hey, we had a really low p-value and really high correlation coefficient. It's about making the invisible visible, whether if it's data visualization or systems thinking. Systems thinking, data visualization, and any kind of modeling. That's all that those systems diagrams are, just a type of modeling, mental models, right? Just to clarify our thinking. And when I talk about modeling to understand, whether that's like building a machine learning model or just a paper airplane model, we don't just model to make predictions. A good analyst is going to model in order to understand the relationship between things. What else can you fit in the model? What else makes sense in the model? And how can, and unless we're modeling and beating up those models, like rigorously challenging them, we can't make them any better. So otherwise we're just accepting a prediction machine unless we start picking this apart, tease it apart, and be your strongest critic. Turn your stuff inside out to see how it's working, because all models are as an approximation of reality. Here's some recommended reading if you're into that kind of thing. If there's one thing you want to take from this on the stat side, it's this first one, Visual and Statistical Thinking by Edward R. Tufte. He charges like $20 for the PDF of that on his website, but I'm sure you can find it pretty easy. And then these other two books by Tufte are phenomenal. And if you're like, hey, where do I even start with getting my head around interpreting regressions and data at a deeper level, I very much recommend Regression and Other Stories by Andrew Gelman, Hill, and Batari. And then on the systems side of things, Thinking in Systems, Systems Thinking for Social Change, those are both two great books. Or if you Google for a brief visit of the Systems Zoo, you can find a nice little PDF of chapter 2 of my book. And it's got all the diagrams, starting with the bathtub and ending with much more complex stuff. Thank you.
This is perfect. I'm doing research currently. We just over it, so I'm glad that I get to do this.
Yeah.
Very important.
Cool. Thank you, Zachariah. Yeah.
Okay, I've got a little bit more business to bore you with. Thank you, man. I actually went to a Tufte workshop about 15 years ago, and it's probably the best, the best done and executed workshop I've ever been to. It was so polished and interesting, and you could tell he had done it a million times. But the most interesting visualization, the one that I really remember from that is Napoleon's invasion into Russia, where it shows how his army shrank the further it went into Russia, and to the point where they decided to retreat, and how it shrank even further, and where they part of his army broke through some ice and started dying off. It was, yeah, right. Yeah, it was just, I mean, but it was a crazy simple visualization that communicated kind of the complexity of that data in a very straightforward way, because it showed you exactly where they were in Russia when all those different things happened, and the size of his force was just this gradually shrinking wedge until it was nothing more than just a couple little lines running out of Russia.
400,000 people
Yeah.
in the invading army, and it shows that on the width of a big marker line, it shows you at every stage geographically where they go, and then the retreat, and then starting with the retreat, they move it back to France, like 20,000. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And it shows a little temperature gauge, what the temperature is like. You see where there's the line cuts in half as they cross a river. There's a whole piece of art that shows people rushing across this river, and it's crazy. Yeah.
I need to, maybe, hold on and share.
It's the best anti-war poster ever.
Yeah. Yeah, that guy is brilliant. Let's see, and where do I go here? Okay, I gotta fast forward. Okay, few final things to point out. So our upcoming ACM San Antonio events, we've got another event in May 13th, and then we've got, we're repeating our game jam thing from last year called Velocicode. That'll be during the month of July. And then a couple more events, one in September and one in November. So yeah, there are QR codes. I'll leave these up, and we've got cards and things, and so we've got all the information and stuff that you might want. But please consider coming to some of these other events that we've got. And then tonight was part of AI April. We have a few more AI April events going on. Thinking with machines. Anyways, you can read all these. Do we know, is DevSA putting these on back?
All Geeks and Drinks.
Oh, Geeks and Drinks.
This is a very limited list of them. I just wanted to get the next 4 upcoming events.
Okay.
If you're curious about future ones, definitely check out the Geeks and Drinks website, or you can go to the DevSA events website, or the devsa.community/events, and you can find their other events coming up there. So they have a showcase at the end of the month.
And then Tech Block is putting on Tech Day 2026 at the close to the end of April 21st. So is that what they a bunch of people come in and?
It's like a twofold thing. It's like a way for entrepreneurs and Kickstarters and startups to kind of like get funding for some of this stuff.
Okay.
There's going to be a competition on the day before Tech Day.
Okay.
So the Tech Day is going to be an event of a bunch of different organizations hosting events talking about tech in San Antonio. So definitely go check out the big large 2-day event. They've been kind of advertising it. Got some cool sponsors going to be there, so it's free. Check it out.
Go get some funding. All right, let's see what else. Thank you very much to DevSA for sure, and then also for Geekdom for housing us and giving us a place to present, but also to our members. Thank you very much for the members. We do have a few members for ACM San Antonio. Thank you very much for supporting us. We definitely appreciate it. Let's see what else. Feedback. So complaints, comments, things you didn't like, things you liked, website bugs. There you go. Give us feedback. And why did you take a picture of the QR code? On my presentation, of course. Anyways, so join us either as a member or just keep coming to these events. We love having you. Anyways, more QR codes, lots of, that's it. So thank you very much for being here. You had an hour to digest food, so please grab more pizza and stuff it down your gullets. But we really enjoyed y'all being here. And then also thank you very much, Ryan. We really appreciate the work that you and Haven for Hope are doing. That's good, important stuff. But that's it. So feel free to hang out and keep talking, keep eating, talk to Ryan, or just stare at him.
Discord too. ACM San Antonio opens our Discord as well. So if you're here to keep up with this ACM thing, check it out.
Yeah. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Mark.
Yep.